Good Monday morning. I'm Sinclair Samoa.
And I'm Valerie Castro. Joe and Savannah are on assignment. Right now on Morning News Now, looming indictment. The former president claiming he'll be arrested tomorrow in connection with those alleged hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. The former president also calling on supporters to, quote, protest and take our nation back if he's detained. What we know about where the investigation stands this morning and how top Republicans are responding. From Beijing to Moscow, this morning, China's President Xi Jinping is in Russia for his first trip there since the war in Ukraine started to meet with President Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, back here at home, the White House hoping to cool red-hot tensions between the U.S. and Russia. We're covering it all this morning. Not enough. Financial stocks overseas tanking this morning, even after Swiss banking titan UBS said it would buy its embattled rival Credit Suisse in a multi-billion-dollar deal. We'll take a look at the fine print on that purchase and what this could mean for your money. And you know, we always like to stay on the bright side here on Morning News Now. On this International Day of Happiness, we've got some top tips on how you can weather those tough times through a little something called micro joys. And happy Monday morning to you.
Yes, and we'll get to those micro joys. We love to start the day that way.
Of course, yes. We begin this morning with major new developments in one of the ongoing investigations into former President Trump.
Yeah, this one is the grand jury proceeding in the Manhattan DA's years-long investigation into alleged hush money payments made to Stormy Daniels back in 2016. One final witness is expected to testify today, and lawyer Rob Costello says he was contacted by Trump's legal team to appear before the grand jury to discuss what he knows about the payments. His testimony is expected to contradict key witness and former Trump attorney Michael Cohen's version of events. The former president has denied any wrongdoing. Over the weekend, Trump took to social media, calling on his supporters to protest a potential indictment. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard joins us now from West Palm Beach, Florida, with the latest on this. Vaughn, good morning. So first, can you just walk us through what we can expect to see today? What do we know about attorney Rob Costello, and will Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, testify again?
Right, Sinclair and Valerie, this is the secret grand jury proceedings here out of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which have left a lot of question marks exactly where this process, where this investigation stands. But what we now know is that as of yesterday afternoon, Michael Cohen, the former fixer and lawyer to Donald Trump, who flipped on the former president and is now the key witness in this probe, he now says that he will, in fact, be on standby later this afternoon to go before that grand jury again as a potential rebuttal to another witness. That witness being his former legal advisor, Robert Costello. Listen to Michael Cohen on MSNBC yesterday.
I was asked to make myself available and to be at the DA's office tomorrow as a rebuttal witness. This is not about a vendetta. This is not about, as my book, revenge. This is about Donald Trump being held accountable for his own dirty deeds. Plain and simple. I don't want to see anyone, and that includes Donald Trump, indicted, prosecuted, convicted, incarcerated, because I fundamentally, or the country fundamentally disagrees with so much of what comes out of his mouth. I want to see him held accountable for charges that he's guilty of.
So come this afternoon, guys, there is the potential that both Costello and Cohen go before the grand jury as these proceedings continue.
Okay, Yvonne, quickly here, are there questions about Michael Cohen's credibility as a key witness in this case?
Yes, there definitely are. Michael Cohen served 3 years, 3-year prison term. Michael Cohen is somebody who pleaded guilty to federal prosecutors in the past. The federal prosecutors at the time said that he had a history of deception. A judge said that he had given in 2020 misleading and false statements when he appealed his prison sentence. Yet Michael Cohen, he has testified for hundreds of hours at this point as part of the Mueller probe in front of Congress, and even the Mueller prosecutors themselves had written in a statement that they believed his statements in the past to have been credible. But the question is, to what extent had he been cooperating? Michael Cohen now makes the case that he is being wholly forthright here with these investigators.
Important analysis. Vaughn Hilliard, thank you so much.
Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos for more on this. Danny, good morning. This case dates back nearly 7 years. Why did it take so long for the state to bring this in front of a grand jury? What's at stake here?
Possibly the time was because Trump was in office, and there may have been an argument that he was immune and that told the statute of limitations. But it's still a risk. At the core, this is a prosecution that would happen if it did 6, 7 years after the conduct alleged, and that creates problems. Whether or not a statute of limitations prohibits it, anytime you bring charges that many years afterwards, evidence fades, memories fade, witnesses disappear, sometimes they die. So that makes things a little problematic. This is a paper-intensive case, so maybe not so much, but certainly when it comes to getting witnesses, that always makes it more difficult, especially if this ends up being a misdemeanor case, which is a possibility.
I mean, to that end, what kind of criminal charges could the former president be facing, and what evidence would the prosecution have to bring forward?
Most people have been talking about falsifying business records. In New York, that is a misdemeanor unless it's used to conceal another crime, in which case it gets bumped up to a felony. But what is the other crime? What if it's election law violations, New York state or federal? Couple problems there. Number one, it's a novel legal theory. Number two, can the state consider a federal crime as part of that predicate crime for the felony? And number three, you have a situation where it isn't that clear of a violation of election law. The classic violation is I give you a bag of cash and you fail to report that bag of cash. The theory here is much more attenuated. The idea is that by Michael Cohen opening up his pocket, paying Stormy Daniels, and then Michael Cohen being reimbursed, that crime, that election law crime, is the benefit of Stormy Daniels' silence, not a bag of money, her silence. And if you use that argument, almost anything good that happens to a campaign might be a campaign contribution that has to be reported. So it's a slippery slope.
And Danny, we know this is unprecedented. No U.S. president has ever been charged with a crime. Does this influence the proceedings here?
Of course it does. I mean, in fact, even the proceedings for arrest, you can't possibly do what with former President Trump what you would do with a normal arrestee in New York County. You can't send him to the precinct, do some processing, and then send him to the central booking and stick him in a cell while he waits for court. That's not going to work. So the idea that nobody's above the law and everybody's equal under the law is kind of true, but not really when it comes to things like presidential security. Look, if they can block off the road and cause traffic for the rest of us, then the president is different. Similarly, if he's arrested, even a former president is different. There are security concerns.
All right, should be an interesting week.
Yeah, for sure. Will.
Thank you.
Former President Trump is calling on his supporters to protest ahead of his potential arrest. In a post on social media over the weekend, he told his supporters to, quote, take back the nation if he's indicted. Offline on Capitol Hill, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy pushed back against the former president's call to protest.
I don't think people should protest this, no. And I think President Trump, if you talk to him, he doesn't believe that either.
But despite this, McCarthy slammed the investigation as a, quote, outrageous abuse of power. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now with more. Ryan, good morning. So we just heard from McCarthy there. How have Republican lawmakers responded to Trump's social media post?
Well, Zigley, they really have rallied around Donald Trump. They're echoing his calls that they believe that this is an unfair prosecution and that the district attorney in Manhattan is nothing more than a progressive essentially vigilante that's out to get Donald Trump and is supported by George Soros, who is, of course, a big Democratic donor. You know, what we see is almost a rallying cry by many of these Republicans, especially in the House of Representatives, who really are kind of the base of the Republican Party and really the base of support for Donald Trump. And take it a step further, Kevin McCarthy has even suggested that the House Judiciary Committee, even perhaps the Oversight Committee, launch an investigation into Alvin Bragg to see if his conduct here is inappropriate. So right now, Donald Trump really getting a lot of support, particularly from these House Republicans who are among his biggest supporters.
And Ryan, notably, sort of in a different vein, McCarthy did distance himself from Trump's call to protest. Have others come out with similar sentiments?
Yeah, it's interesting. These Republicans are a little leery about the idea of a protest. And it's not just because they don't necessarily think that that's a good idea, but they also think that it could get some of Trump's supporters in trouble. Listen to what the former Vice President Mike Pence had to say about it.
he's calling on people to protest, to come out and protest, take our nation back. We know what happened the last time he said that.
Well, John, the American people have a constitutional right to peaceably assemble. The violence that occurred on January 6th, the violence that occurred in cities throughout this country in the summer of 2020 was a disgrace. The American people won't tolerate it.
So you hear Pence there essentially saying it's okay to protest, but don't take it too far. You heard some of Trump's other supporters, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, suggest that if Trump's supporters engage in some level of protest, that they could be being trapped by federal investigators, a kind of a conspiracy theory that was an outcry from January 6th. So there isn't necessarily a lot of rallying of support behind this idea of mass protests behind the former President Donald Trump, even from his Republican allies.
And Ryan, we're kind of going across the aisle here because the sentiment appears to be clear among the president's supporters in Congress. But have we heard from any moderate Republicans or from Democrats on this?
Yeah, Democrats seem to be holding their fire right now, allowing the process to play itself out, to see if an indictment actually happens before taking too strong of a stance. But even some moderate Republicans are still echoing these talking points from the Republican Party and from the Trump campaign that perhaps there's some sort of two-tiered system of justice that Donald Trump's the victim of. But here's a sample of what some of these elected officials had to say.
No one is above the law, not even the former president of the United States.
The viable question for the American people is whether or not you have a progressive prosecutor using the justice system to go after political enemies for a political splash.
I would hope that if they brought charges that they have a strong case because this is, as you said, it's unprecedented.
There's no doubt that this is going to dominate the conversation on Capitol Hill this week. There isn't a lot of significant legislation that's being debated right now. The House Republicans are in Florida for their retreat, where this is going to be a big topic of conversation. So we'll have to see if this indictment plays out and how that really impacts the day-to-day business in Washington.
Ryan Nobles, thanks so much.
Turning now to a high-stakes summit between two of the world's most powerful nations, which could have major implications for the war in Ukraine. China's President Xi Jinping is in Russia for a state visit. He's expected to sit down with Russian President Vladimir Putin for a meeting that will be closely watched by the United States. Over the weekend, Putin visited Crimea and the Russian-occupied city of Mariupol in a show of defiance, days after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for him over the deportation of Ukrainian children. Moscow denies the charges. Writing in a Chinese newspaper, Putin welcomed Xi's, quote, willingness to play a constructive role in resolving the crisis, calling him a good old friend. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer is with us from Beijing, and we're also joined by NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli. Good morning to you both. Janice, let's start with you. President Xi also wrote an article in Russian media ahead of his visit. What's the message for Putin when it comes to the war?
Well, in this article, Xi Jinping called for pragmatism on Ukraine. He pushed China's 12-point proposal, which has been largely dismissed by the West, and also talked of a world that was threatened by hegemony, despotism, and bullying. Quote, there is no universal model of government, and there is no world order where the decisive word belongs to a single country. Xi is talking, of course, not about Russia and its war in Ukraine, but about the United States. This will be closely watched, as you say, and also very highly scrutinized. These two men consider themselves good friends. They've met more than 40 times. But the China-Russia relationship itself is largely unsentimental. It relies on trade and also on strategic opportunity, in that both of them find some common ground in their opposition to the U.S. and American foreign policy. But that Xi Jinping, the leader of a powerful country in the world, would even visit Moscow at a time when the war in Ukraine is raging is going to be seen as a huge symbolic victory for Vladimir Putin.
Mike, what's the reaction in Washington to this symbolic meeting, as Janice just said? How is the White House viewing it?
Well, what we've been hearing from administration officials, obviously there's concern about what they expect, but also where there's some uncertainty about this meeting. Let's start there. The biggest question heading into this meeting is whether China might be willing to do more to both shore up Russia economically at a time when we've seen obviously strong Western sanctions against Russia, Well, will they go further in providing lethal aid to Russia in support of their fight against Ukraine? But then where there's an expectation, and White House officials have been working hard to sort of pre-butt this, is the idea that China is going to again try to play the role of peacekeeper here, promoting the idea of a ceasefire. You heard John Kirby from the National Security Council really responding to that ahead of this over the weekend. Take a listen.
There's no question that both China and Russia, and this is right out in the national security strategy, are two countries that are chafing against this international rules-based order. If, coming out of this meeting, there's some sort of call for a ceasefire, well, that's just going to be unacceptable, because all that's going to do, Mike, is ratify Russia's conquest to date. All that's going to do is give Mr. Putin more time to refit, retrain, reman, and try to plan for renewed offensives at a time of his choosing.
We've talked about this so often, the idea that President Biden views our foreign policy as a contest between autocracies like China and Russia and of democracies like the United States. That's why we've seen the president really working to shore up those Western alliances of late. Last week, I was in San Diego when he was with the prime ministers of Australia and the United Kingdom announcing that nuclear submarine deal. And this week, President Biden will make his first trip to Canada. He's taking office, a key G7 and NATO member there as well.
And Janice, this visit comes after China secured a major diplomatic coup, brokering a deal to help restore ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Is China pushing to be more influential on the world stage? What is Beijing aiming to get out of this trip?
Well, as Mike mentioned, Chinese officials are framing Xi's visit as a trip for peace, though China's role as peacemaker in this dispute is debatable. The two men a year ago, just before Russia launched its invasion, declared a partnership with no limits. We've seen ties only deepen. Beijing has tried to straddle the issue because it doesn't want to risk straining ties with Putin. So China goes into this kind of with its hands tied, but with more leverage in Russia, considering the degree of economic dependence that Moscow has on Beijing these days. Xi Jinping is not likely to leave Moscow empty-handed, as they say, but then it's an issue of what happens with it. There is speculation he's supposed to have a phone call with President Zelensky later in the week. There's already been a phone conversation, a very rare one, between the foreign ministers of China and Ukraine. But the U.S. has already said it's opposed to anything that's going to ratify Russian conquest. Russia has said that it's not going to agree to anything that doesn't include territory that it already controls. And Ukraine's government is saying that it's not going to agree to any sort of concessions. So it's unclear what Xi Jinping is going to come up with. It will certainly probably fall short of any meaningful settlement.
And Mike, we understand that the White House is trying to soften its tone on China ahead of this meeting. That's according to current and former U.S. officials. Tell us a little bit about why that is and what NBC News has learned.
Well, President Biden has been consistent. He wants to see a relationship of competition, not conflict, between the United States and China. But we've been veering ever closer to conflict, especially in the wake of that Chinese spy balloon incident over U.S. soil. We saw the cancellation of that meeting between Secretary of State Tony Blinken and his Chinese counterpart in Beijing. So the U.S., with a real concern about what I mentioned earlier, the possibility of China providing lethal aid to Russia, has been softening its tone, trying to dial back the rhetoric a bit, because as one U.S. official told our colleagues Carol Lee and Courtney Kube, they don't want to put China in a box here where they feel they need to not show any weakness by not providing that aid. That being said, U.S. officials are also considering what potential sanctions they might impose on China if they go ahead with them.
All right, Janice and Mike, thank you both so much. The start of a new week is bringing more uncertainty in the banking world and on Wall Street. And in an effort to stabilize the financial industry, Swiss banking giant UBS agreed to buy its struggling rival Credit Suisse in a $3.2 billion deal.
But the acquisition did not have the calming effect many hoped for. Instead, it's shaking up the markets in a major way this morning. Caleb Silver, editor-in-chief at Investopedia, joins us now to talk about this. Good morning, Caleb. So markets are open in other parts of the world, and shares of Credit Suisse have plunged by more than 60%. We know U.S. futures are also down. Not a great reaction from investors. Is this a bad sign?
Well, it's never a good sign when one bank is sort of persuaded to take over another bank. Call it a shotgun wedding, Swiss style, but hold the fondue here. This is Credit Suisse, which was having a lot of trouble here, and now the Swiss government first offering it a $54 billion loan last week to pay its depositors, now making this merger happen with UBS, a huge competitor. Credit Suisse is a 167-year-old bank being taken over by a competitor in Switzerland, not sitting that great in the banking sector. Markets overall there are kind of okay, and if you looked last week, unbelievably, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both rose for the first week in several, while the Dow, which is heavier with financial stocks, suffered a little bit. So the banking sector is really feeling the impact of this in the markets. The rest of the markets are kind of digesting it. Big Fed meeting this week, though.
And Caleb, what does this deal and the reaction to it mean for our money here? Is this of a concern?
Not necessarily, because these are two big Swiss banks, and Credit Suisse had troubles that were very different from what was going on at Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and other regional banks here in the U.S. That said, all banks are kind of connected in this global financial system we have today. We learned that back in 2008. We're learning it again now. So when there's trouble in the banks, especially these multi-trillion-dollar institutions, we feel it ultimately.
And to that end, right, we're all interconnected. Many banks internationally have rallied together to support the U.S. dollar. What does that mean for us?
Yeah, what that actually means is that their banks loan each other dollars, and the Fed and central banks loan banks dollars to what they call the discount window. So usually that's a 7-day borrow. Now they've said you can borrow for as much as 1 day or as little as 1 day, because what does the Fed want to do? And the central banks of Canada, England, ECB, Japan, and others, they want to make liquidity available. Make sure there's plenty of money out there so banks can loan money to one another and to their customers. That's what this is. It's not necessarily trying to boost the dollar, just make more dollars available so we don't get into a liquidity crunch like we saw in 2008.
And Senator Elizabeth Warren is a member of the Bank Committee. Over the weekend, she sent a letter to the Fed, the Treasury, and the FDIC asking for a probe into the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, which started all of this. She was on Meet the Press yesterday. She was asked if she thinks that the president should fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Look, my views on Jay Powell are well known at this point. He has had two jobs. One is to deal with monetary policy. One is to deal with regulation. He has failed at both.
Right. Would you advise President Biden to replace him?
Look, I don't think he should be chairman of the Federal Reserve. I have said it as publicly as I know how to say it. I've said it to everyone.
Some strong words from her there. What's your reaction to that? And are we hearing similar thoughts from other people in the financial industry?
You've heard a little bit about that, but don't forget, Fed Chair Powell is the president of the Federal Reserve, but there's also a huge Fed Board of Governors. It's not just him. He gets all the attention because he has the one that has to go out and face the public, but he's part of the FOMC. That's a huge committee of policymakers, and the president can't fire the Fed chair unless it's for cause. Is there a cause here? He's trying to deal with two crises at the same time. I don't think that's going to happen. Not the first time we've heard Senator Warren say that. Probably not the last.
Yeah, we'll hear from the Fed chair later this week.
Right.
Caleb Silver, thank you so much.
Let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather and the latest on a storm system hitting the west.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with more on the first day of spring. Michelle, good morning.
Hi there, guys. Great to see you. And yeah, the first day of spring arrives later on this evening around 5:24 Eastern time. And it's very winter-like across the country. We're feeling chilly in the east, really cold in portions of the south, and then winter weather once again in the west. So we have back-to-back storms that we're watching in the west. The first one came through yesterday. We're still seeing the rain and snow from that. We're still seeing lots of snow in the higher elevations. And then a more powerful storm systems, it will come on shore tomorrow, and that's going to bring feet of snow in the higher elevation mountains. And we're going to see some rain in Southern California once again. So winter alerts for 2 million people this morning. We're looking at winter storm warnings, winter storm watches, and winter weather advisory. Your winter storm warning, that is in the pink. The winter storm watch is in the blue. So we're looking at up to 4 feet of snow in some spots. Also very windy. This will be for tomorrow. 18 million people impacted. We're going to see winds gusting up to 60, 70 miles per hour. That's going to bring down some trees. Also some power lines. That includes portions of Southern California. The ground is still really wet. So, of course, we do have the concern for those trees coming down. And then additional power outages. We're looking at the storm system moving onshore tomorrow. Today, we're looking at that heavy snow and rain into the Four Corners, steady showers lingering throughout the northwest. Tomorrow, the storm system will bring some flood threat to portions of Southern California. An atmospheric river, once again, will enhance that precipitation. This will move off to the east as we head towards Wednesday. And then this will become our next cross-country storm. We're eventually going to see the chance for severe weather into the south by Thursday and Friday. As far as the snowfall totals, again, we're looking up to 4 4 feet of snow in some spots. So winter is not quitting in the west. Also lots of rain. We're looking at 5 inches possible in portions of the San Bernardino Mountains, and also looking at a flood risk tomorrow in portions of Southern California. Back to you guys.
Hoping people stay safe. Michelle Grossman, thank you so much. And coming up on this hour of Morning News Now, a looming no-confidence vote this morning for French President Emmanuel Macron and his government as protests over a controversial change in pension policy rock the country.
We've got the latest on that and how the vote could affect U.S. relations with a longtime European ally. Next.
Welcome back. French President Emmanuel Macron's government is facing a no-confidence vote today over his decision to raise the country's retirement age from 62 to 64. The decision has sparked widespread protests and strikes across France. NBC News foreign correspondent Megan Fitzgerald is in Paris and joins us now with the latest. Good morning, Megan. So what are you hearing about the government's chances of surviving the no-confidence vote, and what happens in each situation?
Yeah, great question. What we know with new information just coming in is that lawmakers are going to vote inside the National Assembly behind me later on this afternoon, local time, on those 2 motions of no confidence. And look, it is not expected to pass. It is expected to fail because they don't at this moment have the majority of votes needed. But in the event that the no confidence motions do pass, what that means is that Macron's government would fall. So we're talking about his prime minister and cabinet members. They would be forced to resign. He would remain in power, and this legislation would be overturned. But again, not likely to happen. So, but that still wouldn't look like a win necessarily for Macron, because when you look at the polls, he's really struggling. 70% of this country is against him pushing through this legislation without a vote in parliament. His popularity is sitting at 28%. People are angry here. But Macron said this is something that he had to do because the birth rate, just like we're seeing in many countries around the world, birth rate is slowing down. People are living longer, and he fears that the pension plan is risking running into a deficit. And so this is a move he said he had to do. And of course, he does have 4 more years to redefine the legacy of his presidency.
So no confidence vote, unlikely to happen, though his approval rating still not great. And I mean, when we look at other countries, the retirement age of 64 is still pretty low compared to other nations. In the U.S., for example, full retirement is 67. So why has there been so much anger in France?
It's such a good point to make. You know, France is a nation where people really value that work-life balance. They work about 35 hours a week. They take their vacations. They believe that they pay more in taxes than most. And so they thought that the reward for that is being able to retire at 62 so that they could live out the rest of their life. That's obviously not likely to happen. It's going to be 64. They're concerned that it will just continue to rise. So people are angry. We've seen them taken to the streets for the last several weeks, most certainly within the last several days since Thursday when that legislation bypassed Parliament and was pushed through. In Lyon, they ransacked the city hall. They set fires to things. Here in Paris, projectiles were thrown at police. We know that bikes and trash were set on fire. There have been these strikes happening where trash pickup hasn't been picked up in this city of Paris for some 2 weeks. So tons and tons of trash are just piling up. A nationwide strike is expected on Thursday. We think that more protests are going to be happening today and throughout the week. In fact, I want to show you down here, just outside of the National Assembly, you can see police are already putting up barricades. Police are surrounding the area here in anticipation of more protests because people are frustrated. They are angry, and certainly all eyes are on the National Assembly and what happens in just a couple of hours. So, Clay?
All eyes on the Assembly and on France. Megan Fitzgerald, thanks so much.
More international news now. A major earthquake has hit southern Ecuador, killing at least 15 people and injuring more than 100 others.
Ali Arouzi joins us now from London with that and other international news. Good morning, Ali.
Good morning. That's right. A powerful earthquake of 6.8 magnitude shook southern Ecuador in a region around the country's second largest city, killing at least 15 people, injuring over 126 others, and causing damage to homes, buildings, and infrastructure, sending panicked residents onto the streets. Videos on social media show people gathered on the street. Some reported objects falling inside their homes. Pope Francis offered prayers yesterday for the victims of the earthquake that struck territory in Ecuador and parts of Peru. During his weekly Sunday noon blessing, Francis said the 6.8 magnitude quake caused death and injury and heavy damage, adding that he is close to the Ecuadorian people and assured them of prayers for the dead and suffering. And finally, the undisputed champion of the world for the happiest place to live on the planet is Finland for the 6th year in a row. The World Happiness Report compiled by the UN is published on the 20th of March annually to mark International Day of Happiness. The study asks respondents to evaluate their happiness, then the results are correlated with various factors like GDP per capita, social support, health and life expectancy, freedom, generosity, and corruption. And once again, all Nordic nations did well in the 2023 report, making up 5 of the 7 top places. And your 8 o'clock headlines will be coming from Finland.
Amazing. I mean, I think we should all take some notes from them.
Sounds good. Ali, thank you so much.
Thank you. And coming up, we'll bring you the Navajo Nation's fight for one of humanity's most precious resources, running water.
Now that fight is headed all the way to the Supreme Court. We'll break down that case next.
This morning, the Supreme Court is considering a decades-long case involving the Navajo Nation's fight for water access from the Colorado River.
In an exclusive report, members of the tribe gave NBC News a tour of Navajo sites in New Mexico. They say thousands of the roughly 170,000 people who live there do not have access to running water.
And many of them make long trips to wells where they're forced to fill up giant tanks in order to have water long term. Now the tribe is suing. They say the federal government is not honoring an 1868 treaty in which federal officials said they would provide the Navajo Nation with the proper resources needed for agriculture.
But Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogger, who is representing the federal government, says the government has no obligation to the tribe when it comes to providing access to water from a specific source.
Here to break it down is NBC News Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley. Thank you so much for being with us. So, Lawrence, I know you visited the Navajo Nation for this report. What exactly was your experience like, and what did you hear from members of the tribe?
Well, as you mentioned, thousands of the tribe don't have running water. There's a long-term lack of investment in water infrastructure, which the tribe says, is a huge impediment to them being able to develop in the way that they would like, not just for the people who live there, but also to try and encourage members of the tribe who've left the reservation to return, because a lot of people end up leaving for jobs and for education and so on. And so this case, is a way for them to try and make that case that historically water access has been a huge problem and that the federal government is a huge part of that.
And what's the argument from the Navajo Nation that it has a right to the water from the Colorado River Basin? And why does the federal government seem to be unwilling to give them that access?
This goes right back to the 1868 treaty between the Navajo and the U.S. government, when the Navajo were allowed to return to their ancestral lands. And in return, the federal government said that they would promise them the ability to do their agriculture that they needed to do and would help them to do that. The tribe says, well, how can you do agriculture without water? And therefore, the federal government has a duty to ensure that the Navajo has their water needs assessed, and also that they can have the water that they need. And of course, the Colorado River, which flows right past the Navajo reservation, provides water to the entire Southwest. And yet the Navajo Nation does not have a right to draw water from the lower Colorado. And that's what this case is about. The federal government says, well, there's all these complex arrangements between the federal government, the states, and tribes that determine how the water is allocated from the Colorado River throughout, the whole of the Southwest, including as far as California. And that if the Navajo win this case and eventually are able to bring this claim, that would upend all those agreements. And, if the Navajo gets something, then someone else would have to lose out.
And this is not the first time we've seen indigenous communities fight for water rights. Of course, it hasn't always made it to the Supreme Court. So briefly, what are you looking for today as it heads to SCOTUS?
Well, the Supreme Court, unfortunately for the tribes, it has not been super friendly to them over the years. There has a conservative majority, 6-3 conservative majority, and just last year ruled against tribes in Oklahoma over another case involving tribal authority. So the tribe is going into this possibly not thinking that it has a great chance of winning. But, the oral argument today will help us to determine, from the questions that the justices ask, whether there's a chance they could win, possibly, with the help of conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch, who's one of the conservatives who has sided with Native Americans in the past.
A lot to watch here. Lawrence Hurley, thank you so much.
Now to the craze for using the drug Ozempic for weight loss. Fueled by shortages and high costs, there's been a surge in Ozempic knockoffs. Experts are questioning what exactly they're made of and whether they're safe. I took a closer look. It's a weight loss drug so popular, backed by celebrities, and is the talk of social media, it even made the Oscars.
When I look around this room, I can't help but wonder, is Ozempic right for me?
Ozempic, the brand name of the FDA-approved drug semaglutide used to treat type 2 diabetes. Wegovy is a similar drug made by the same company for weight loss. The effectiveness and demand leading to a nationwide shortage, leaving people hungry for an alternative. Ange Slater says she owes her 90-pound postpartum weight loss, documented on her TikTok page, to a compounded or reconstituted version of the drug.
So I started Googling, trying to find like a telehealth company that would be able to do it.
That led her to a compounding pharmacy, able to provide a different, though not FDA-approved variety, a combination of semaglutide mixed with vitamin B12.
Did you ever have any concerns that this was the compounding version of the drug and not the actual FDA-approved version?
No, because compounding has been used for a long time for other, medications.
But Novo Nordisk, the manufacturer behind Ozempic and Wegovy, said in a statement to NBC News it does not provide the ingredient to these types of pharmacies. Drug experts say compounding pharmacies could be taking higher doses of the drug and watering it down, or using a modified chemical version, all posing a risk to people injecting it.
So what is going into this compounded version?
That's exactly the problem, is that we don't know. I think about it like street drugs. You don't know if you're going to get something good. Don't know if you're going to get something bad. And it's always a gamble.
Dr. Shauna Levy, a bariatric surgeon and weight loss specialist, says she's seeing patients who've taken the alternative with bad side effects.
They have extreme nausea, vomiting. And part of that is because, again, they may not be taking the dosing in the way that it's meant to be taken.
In some cases, she says, places advertising as medical spas are offering the drug without much supervision or transparency. Compounding pharmacies came under scrutiny in 2012 after a meningitis outbreak from contaminated steroid pain medications killed more than 100 people and sickened hundreds more, according to the Department of Justice. The problem traced back to a now closed compounding center. That led to multiple convictions, a new law, and a change in FDA regulations. But none of it deterred Slater, who says she felt comfortable with the medical professional she sought the treatment from after asking more questions.
So he, explained all of the accreditations and the certifications. I felt that if a physician was willing to, put his license on the line for these kinds of medications, that, it has to be something that they trust and safe.
But many doctors are still skeptical, specifically of this latest trend.
And this is not like a dig necessarily at compounding pharmacies, because they play an important role in administering certain pharmaceuticals to patients who need, specific formulations. But compounded semaglutide is not well established. It's not studied. There's no test of time. This is a brand new thing, and it's just very inconsistent in how it's being made. There's just a lot of questions.
Lots of questions. The CEO from the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding says numerous pharmacies have gotten cease and desist letters from Novo Nordisk, the drug maker, but no enforcement has taken place. Federal law allows for drugs to be compounded once they are on the FDA's shortage list, and the CEO points out there is nothing in the law to prohibit that, whether or not the drug is patented. Coming up, bringing a bit of revenue back to America's big cities in a work-from-home world.
That's right. After the break, I've got a closer look at how major metro areas like D.C., Chicago, and Philly are filling out those empty office spaces as remote work becomes all the more popular. You're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. Now that more employees are working from home, many of the country's office buildings are empty, leaving cities struggling to get their business districts back on their feet. For example, San Francisco only has reached around a third of its pre-pandemic downtown activity, according to a recent study. Now, some cities are filling those empty offices with apartments. Gary Cohen's grandfather bought this D.C. office building nearly 60 years ago.
This was the first high-rise office building in this part of town.
Soon, it will make history as the first high-rise multifamily residential building in Washington's business district.
The office market wasn't that great even before COVID, but then when COVID happened, it pretty much died.
Cohen is chairman of D.C. area developer Wilco and owner of the building, soon to be known as L Apartments. It's one of 5 office-to-residential conversions happening in Washington, D.C.'s Golden Triangle, marking a growing trend in cities nationwide. Today, office attendance is less than half of what it was pre-pandemic in some of the largest metro areas, struggling to lure workers back in person.
Neighborhoods where people live have been a lot more resilient than neighborhoods that have only one use.
Leona Agaritas is executive director of the Golden Triangle Business Improvement District in Washington, D.C. She says building vacancy in the area is at 22%, a historic high.
The Golden Triangle includes 34 million square feet of office space and only 36 residential units.
Agaritas says with remote work here to stay, cities need new revenue streams, like Cohen's project. After a 3-year vacancy, the building will have 163 residential units.
This is a unit right here.
And 8,000 square feet of retail. An endeavor catching the eye of D.C.'s mayor.
We encourage more property owners to follow their lead.
Mayor Muriel Bowser announcing plans for an abatement program in December, intended to incentivize office-to-apartment building conversions, address the affordable housing crisis, and revitalize the business district. Still, office-to-apartment conversions are no silver bullet. What are some of the challenges of converting an office building into an apartment space?
It's endless. New plumbing, new electrical, new mechanical. So you're doing a lot of core drilling. It's about a $65 million job.
But Cohen says the costs are worth it. What do you think your grandfather would make of what this building's becoming today?
I think it's kind of interesting. It's come full circle.
The building likely ready in 2024 as how we work continues to affect where we live. Now, not all office buildings are good candidates for apartment conversions. For example, in D.C., a recent study found that only around 1 in 20 office buildings is a good candidate for this conversion. Still, it's a trend many cities are watching and following.
Financial headlines now. New York Community Bank has agreed to buy a significant chunk of the failed Signature Bank in a $2.7 billion deal.
CNBC's Pippa Stevens joins us now with that and other financial headlines. Good morning, Pippa.
Good morning. Well, the FDIC says New York Community Bank has agreed to buy a large chunk of Signature Bank, which failed a week ago, for nearly $3 billion. Signature's 40 branches will become Flagstar Bank, one of NYCB's subsidiaries. Like Silicon Valley Bank, Signature had a large amount of uninsured deposits and significant exposure to cryptocurrencies and other tech-focused lending. Ford is recalling more than 1.5 million vehicles to fix leaky brake hoses and windshield wiper arms that could break. The brake issue covers nearly 1.3 million Ford Fusion and Lincoln MKX midsize cars from the 2013 to 2018 model year. The second recall covers F-150 pickups from 2021. Ford will start notifying owners of both recalls over the next few weeks. And Twitter users risk losing access to their accounts as of today. Twitter is taking away two-factor authentication via text message from all users who aren't subscribed to its premium service, Twitter Blue. Two-factor authentication is a security measure that requires you to enter a code when you log in addition to your login details. Twitter may lock users out of their accounts if they haven't disabled that option by today. So many twists and turns here. Back to you.
Truly. Something we'll have to check on our accounts.
Yes.
Pippa, thank you so much.
Thank you. And coming up, if you didn't know it already, today is actually the International Day of Happiness.
And whether you're having a marvelous or manic Monday, we've got some tips on how you can up the joy in your life after this.
Welcome back. He is not everyone's idea of a cuddly companion, but a couple from Louisiana has won the right to keep a nutria as a pet. Nudie is a 22-pound rodent with beady eyes, orange teeth, and a rat's tail. The AP reports that Nudie lived with the Lacoste family for over 2 years before the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries tried to move him into the Baton Rouge Zoo because nutrias are considered a pest and an invasive species. But after an online petition with more than 17,000 signatures demanded the state leave Nudie to his owners, the agency is letting the couple apply for a permit to keep him. I am happy for them, but I am not the one. You will not catch me with anything called a rodent.
That's not the pet for you.
At my house.
Maybe a hamster.
More of a dog person?
Agreed. I will take the dog over a nutria.
Agreed.
We end this hour with a little bit of joy. Today is the International Day of Happiness.
That's right. The United Nations created the holiday a little over 10 years ago as a way to recognize the importance of happiness around the world. But sometimes happiness can feel difficult to find when tragedy and hardship can feel overwhelming.
Here to help us with this is Cindy Spiegel, author of the book Micro Joys, Finding Hope, Especially When Life is Not Okay. Cindy, good morning. Thanks for joining us. First of all, what is a micro joy and how can we all benefit from this idea?
A micro joy is simply an easily accessible moment of joy that we have available to us regardless of our current circumstances, which means that we can tap into micro joys even when we are in the midst of difficult moments.
I love that. That's so important because joy is really a discipline and a practice. It doesn't just come. And to that end, there are a lot of self-care trends going around on social media. I've seen and maybe used the hashtag soft life. So what do you think about our culture's current approach to joy? Are we doing a good enough job at pursuing it and cultivating it?
You know, I think there's something called toxic positivity that is often which often gets conflated with joy, right? Toxic positivity doesn't leave space for negative feelings or perceived negative feelings. So, you know, I often refer to this as the good vibes only culture. You know, in life, there are sometimes bad vibes, right? There is loss, there is sadness. And I think that toxic positivity often gets conflated, and happiness and joy are actually quite different.
International Day of Happiness is taking place during a difficult time in our world. There's war, the climate crisis. Many have been battling seasonal depression this winter. We hear that some of your own difficulties even inspired this book. And what are some simple ways that we can find hope, as your book title says, when life is not okay?
Yeah, so one of the easiest ways to access hope is to use something that I call, it's really a technique for anxiety called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And it really allows us to find deep presence. So if you set your phone for just 2 minutes each day, you think of 5 things that you can see and you name them, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And it instantly brings you into the present moment and allows you temporary respite from everything else that's happening in life. And it's a beautiful technique.
And you just mentioned some of the techniques we can use on this show. We've talked about also the trend of romanticizing your life as a way of finding joy and cultivating happiness. Is that an effective technique? And what tips do you have for mindset shifts around joy?
So, you know, what I would say about that is that happiness and joy are quite different, right? So happiness is fleeting and triggered by external things. Joy comes from within. So I think about deep presence, being mindful of the ordinary moments that are happening around us, listening to the stories of others, and choosing humor. These are all ways to really feel into deep joy.
And Cindy, before we let you go, what are some easy examples of micro joys? What can we think of throughout our day?
Oh, sure. So something we can think of throughout our day is the way the light streams through the window, a very simple one. If you go to a cafe, the smile from your barista or the conversation that you're having, the flowers that are growing as spring is slowly appearing for us, the relationships you have with loved ones. These are all beautiful microjoys that are easily accessible.
Love that. Well, thank you for spreading some micro joy with us, Sydney. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.